Today on Rainbow Country, indie trance artist and producer Annaa Soleseis. That up next on my little gay show, Rainbow Country.
Hi, I'm writer Adam Smith, author of Deep Sniff, A History of Poppers and Queer Futures. You're listening to Rainbow Country with Mark Tara.
Annaa Soleseis, hi, how are you?
I'm doing great, thank you.
Thank you for being here to have your voice, your story be heard by the LGBT community and beyond. So thank you for that. You are a musician, a producer, a multi-instrumentalist, an indie artist. Let's just jump right in with music. Your style of music, the genre of music that you do. How would you describe the style of music that Annaa Soleseis records?
I play from the heart, so whatever comes from there is what I do. It's been called everything from ethereal pop to rock and roll, and even some electronica thrown in there. I think a couple dance songs are in the future as well, so we'll see.
In February 2023, you released Rings of Saturn. This is your 13-song album. Is this your debut record?
This is my third album. I released Event Horizon kind of as a test project in January of 2022. And then I had some ideas to do some electronica slash overdub rock guitar. And as much as they were supposed to be ambient songs, they kind of turned into this more of electronica with a rock groove. And that came out in April of 2022.
And did you record Rings of Saturn during the pandemic?
Yes, Rings of Saturn has a great backstory to it. It started early in the pandemic when I had lost my job. I was early in my transition and I was really lost. And I missed playing with my musical friends, and I just started recording. I used what equipment I had with me at the time and just started laying down bass and drum tracks and adding guitar. And before I knew it, I had over 32 songs, and I'm starting to panic. It's like, oh my God, what am I going to do with all these? So I learned how to sing. I started taking singing lessons with this amazing group of people called Find Your Voice. I'm so grateful to have been connected with them. And they helped me learn how to use my voice properly for singing and for trans issues. And I kind of put Rings of Saturn on hold while I was learning my songs, learning how to sing and writing new stuff that became Event Horizon. Then once I finished those projects, I then came back to Rings of Saturn, and that's what this one is.
So, Annaa, I have to say, and I have to ask, recording your music, recording it during a global pandemic, as well as dealing with your own personal transition, that must have been difficult for you. Talk to me about dealing with all those aspects and what that journey was like for you.
It was difficult. I mean, my transition was almost a worst case scenario. Everything was all lined up for this beautiful transition to who I truly am. I started taking my HRT. The next day, the pandemic dropped, and I lost my support network. I lost access to seeing my doctors in person. I lost so much that I had built up to help me get through what's difficult and the best of times, but throw a global pandemic into that too, where you're now stuck in isolation. It was difficult too to learn how to do the recording from there. But working through all the issues, I really started discovering who I was. As much as I was able to write and connect with my internal feelings, there's nothing like having music to really give the nuance of your emotional whereabouts. And I used that so cathartically to help me get through a very difficult stage. And by the time I'm starting to get healthy and really starting to come around, I'm really starting to enjoy these songs, and they're really starting to mean a lot to me. So it just kind of kept snowballing, and I'm really grateful to have made it through that journey and to get to this point.
Annaa, you wrote these songs, you produced these songs, you played all the instruments, you mixed the tracks. Why did you want to handle all these aspects of the recording process? Talk to me about that.
It it was not planned. I mean, originally my music was just something for me to play against myself, right? To lay down a track of bass and just out of boredom, out of wanting to do something constructive, layer guitar on it. And so I started learning how to do the recording studio with that, and learning about volume levels and tonality, and how to get the best out of mic placements and that kind of stuff. And I never expected that I would ever have gotten to this point now where I have a third album out that I'm very proud of and I'm singing on. It was all of these little steps that I kept learning. I mean, I'm grateful for the online tutorials on YouTube, right? I mean, there's a plethora of information available at our fingertips, but none of this was planned. This was always just pushing myself a little further and a little further. And before you know it, I had a recorded song, and then I recorded a video for it. I was like, oh, this was good. I did this. And that level of confidence didn't just help me to continue with the music and finish Eventurize and then record the next two as well. It gave me the confidence to really start to shine as my own individual, as somebody who had something to give back and something to believe in my own personal journey.
Annaa, you mentioned that Rings of Saturn, this is your third album. Is this the album that you're most proud of?
It is, right? This was what I started recording. I can remember one of the very first songs that, and the very dark days. I started, even without a drum track, even without any other tracks, I just started playing guitar. So I'll just do a test. I'll do a test with my system, see how my volumes are, and I just kind of zoned out, and I started recording slow and again, and I played it back, and I had no idea where that came from. I used a line once that this was kind of like the automatic writing sessions that you used to see in movies where people go into these trances and just start scribbling. This was my music scribbling. This was me telling myself that there's something beautiful in me and something that I want to share. And it's not like everybody else. And it's not something that can be easily defined. Like even now, I don't know what genre of music is that song. I don't know. But these songs, they started showing me who I was. And I started showing myself who I was by evolving these songs even beyond. So this project, Rings of Saturn, which was paused and then continued and completed, to me has some very beautiful songs that not only am I proud of, but they help define a period of my life that I went through that maybe I wouldn't have without this.
Who would you say are some of your favorite artists?
My absolute favorite artist of all time, I would have to say, would be Jimi Hendrix. And when I trace that back, it goes all the way back to Sister Rosetta Tharpe and the way they defined not just only a genre and generations, but they really showed me how to emote feelings through their instrument. So it just wasn't chords on a page, right? Sometimes the notes in the music they play can't be written down. Like, how do you explain Jimi Hendrix on a sheet of notation, right? I believe that the sum of parts could sometimes, having the be greater than the pieces of it alone. So, but really, my influences went from everywhere. It's from when I was young, ABBA, to a lot of Canadian rock and roll. I was talking about this the other day. I used to love 5440 and the Tragically Hip and Honeymoon Suite, the Beatles, Led Zeppelin, and so many great female artists too. I've always been such a fan of Ella Fitzgerald and Etta James. There's just so many genres of music that have influenced me. That's really hard to I mean, we could talk about this for a whole interview. I'd still be going on and on.
So, Annaa Soleseis, I'm interested to know how many instruments does Annaa play?
I'm up to drums, guitar, bass, some keyboard. Um, I played recorder as a little kid, but I would not dare to try that one again. But it's expanding every year. It seems to increase with every album. So I'm around five, I guess.
Did you get your start playing guitar in school?
Mainly, yes. I mean, we had the elementary school recorder program, and they pass around all the other banging instruments like the triangle and the maracas and stuff. But it was really guitar in junior high, and I still remember my great music teacher, Stan Chapman, um, where I started to understand the mechanics and the fundamentals of music. And I was horrible. I was so bad for so long. I had so many people tell me, give up guitar. This isn't for you. Maybe try drumming. Like, oh, come on. I love it. Just let me play. And it took me a very long time to get good. But on the flip side of that, not being allowed to transition when you're younger really makes it hard to emote your feelings properly. So up until I started accepting, become the best version of myself, did I really start to see the growth and the acceptance of my music in a way that I could be proud of and really define myself. But yeah, absolutely, guitar is my favorite instrument.
And your school experience, middle school, high school, what was that like for you?
Yeah, I knew at a young age that I was in the wrong body. And I tried to come out a couple of times. And I remember once trying to come out, I believe I was 12 or 13. And, I kind of wasn't allowed to. It was a very different age, a very different time. And I remember the rebellion that came after that. And I wasn't allowed to be myself. So I was everything else. So I didn't do as good as I could have. I didn't become anywhere as close to my potential in anything other than maybe some chaos and maybe some tomfoolery. But I always had my heart, I guess. So I was never malicious, but I went down a lot of wrong paths. And I learned a lot of great experiences along the way.
So, Annaa, speaking of school, speaking of education, you have a background in electronics engineering. First of all, excuse my ignorance, but what is electronics engineering?
Yeah, I studied that after high school, after I took off a year to kind of discover things. I studied electronics engineering technologist, and basically it's engineering, but without all of the 5, 6 years of education required. I did a very concentrated program. They have similar stuff available now as well, but really I kind of entered the electronics field to help design systems, repair systems. And some of my very first jobs were that was fixing and working on mobile communication equipment back in the early 90s. So a lot of cell phone stuff, a lot of what the time was high-speed data that we look at now. It's like, oh my God, that's so slow. Like you did a fax machine over cellular was amazing back then. But people are like, what's a fax machine? Like, oh, it was really slow. You'd hate it.
Hey, I have a fax machine.
Yeah, well, we used to get them to work over their cell phones back in the early 90s, and that was kind of exciting. Very expensive too back in the time. So beyond that, I kind of kept going with that electronics field. It was interesting. It kept me distracted. I've worked for companies like Nortel Networks, building the network equipment as well. For in the mid to late 90s, all of the communications equipment that was used by all the major telecoms, internet providers. And since then, it's been a bit more diverse. But at the core, working with electronics, and now I'm in the aerospace sector. Um, it has offered a lot of great experiences, and with that also came a very good understanding of music and how my music equipment works. And I've kept some very old music gear working for well past its best before date, and I'm really proud of just being able to be that self-sufficient, I guess.
So, having a background in electronics engineering, is that why you felt you would be able to mix, to produce, to engineer your own recordings?
I think so. I never really thought of that before, but absolutely right. My comfort just to like so many of my field service jobs, you're like, okay, go fix that. I'm like, but I've never seen that before. It's like, we'll figure it out. Yeah, okay, you know what? Maybe you scratch your head a couple of times and really approach the problem from different angles. But music was like that too, where, okay, I have two tracks. What do I do now? How do I well, let's see. If I listen to a professionally done song, I can tell it's kind of got to go in this direction. So I'd keep working, keep engineering that project until I started to get a something that sounded in that same kind of ballpark, and just to reverse think how all that goes, and then also the very creative side too, right? Where you understand that okay, this process flipped on itself can offer some really interesting results that maybe if I want to emote that feeling, I can use a unique process for that. So yeah, no, absolutely. My comfort in going in way over my head has definitely been useful in the recording studio.
So, do you think that you would record other artists, maybe even other trans artists?
I'd love to, absolutely. I finally have a setup that I'm comfortable enough with that I could actually have people here to help them. And yes, I'd be very much interested in that in the future.
So, Anna, we've talked about your music, so let's get to know a little bit better the person behind the music. You are part of the LGBT community, you are transgender. You you knew that you were transgender at an early age, and you said that you felt you were in the wrong body. Talk to me about that. And when you were growing up, how did that manifest for you? Talk to me about that aspect.
Yeah, I'll give you with the layer of understanding that I have now. I was born intersex, and I believe, as well as some very brilliant medical people that I know, that I was a chimera. I am a chimera, where I was a twin inside the uterus, and then we recombined into one person. If you asked me, it was a guy and a girl, and most of the guy's body and most of the girl's mind and heart kind of became me. I think that's really the easiest way to understand it. Like, but having not known that as a kid, I always knew that there was a side of me that was very different, very beautiful, right? I mean, I can remember such great compliments like, you're not like anybody I know, like, you're so unique, you're so special. And as a kid, I just wanted to be normal. I just wanted to be able to not stand out because there's so much pressure on kids. But I knew that who I was different from a very young age, and it led to a lot of confusing and a lot of dark times, a lot of loneliness, and a lot of misunderstanding because there wasn't the support network. There wasn't the social understanding that being born different like this is a beautiful thing, right? We were shown time and again on so many social levels that being anything other than a cisgender heterosexual male was something to be targeted with bullies, with lies, with abuse. We see that now starting to come back again because that group of people are very threatened, it seems, by anything outside that gender norm. But the reality is, as so many psychologists, psychiatrists, the whole field is understanding how much of a spectrum all of our being is, right? So having grown up being in the wrong body, but I felt it led to a lot of times where I couldn't express my feelings without being called, um, feminine, being called something that was very difficult to deal with. So growing up, I remember getting very good at spending time alone. I had great Lego sets. I had universes created I especially love the space Lego, which I think, hey, now that I think of it, the whole Rings of Saturn, the Event Horizon black hole stuff may stem from all of that space exploration because I was stuck. I've been in a pandemic, I guess, for a couple of decades now with isolation, right? But having grown up, there were a lot of beautiful aspects too, right? I mean, when I was not being threatened with being judged or being bullied, I got to discover how much I loved being honest and forthright with people, how much I love nature. And I've always had a closeness to animals, to pets, to farms, zoos. Everything was such a beautiful learning experience. And while very private and lonely, it was very beautiful too. And then growing up in my teens, that's when things start to kind of go to, you know, drugs and alcohol, goes to the rebellion in a lot of ways that, hey, if I can't be me, let's see who I can be. And everything was far away from who I was. And it was, I'll just say, I'm lucky to have made it this far. As I get older, I get better at hiding it. I can remember living out in Calgary once, and I remember going to Oaks Modeling and Talent Agency. I'm like, oh my God, I need a job in sales or something, right? That's where the money is. I got to do this. I got to step away a little from the electronics, being locked up in the back room. I want to live. I'm finding in a city out on my own. And I wanted to be a model. I wanted to be beautiful, right? And there's that little Anna in me that always wanted to be this beautiful star in the night. But they're kind of like, yeah, you're not really a model type. Maybe acting's more your thing. Here, we'll move you over to the acting side of the class and being very passive. I'm like, okay, fine, thanks. But learning to act is all of a sudden, it's like, hey, yeah, you know what? The inside can kind of flourish. The outside becomes this very much somebody else. And that's kind of when I felt less struggle, because my outside just became this more masculine, more cool, more who was I? Like I was any typical Hollywood cool cis hetero male. That was my image. James Dean, let's go with that, right? But it also meant that the inside not getting the attention, the real me was withering a little. And looking back, that was a sad time because I destroyed so many beautiful relationships with girlfriends, with friends, because as they would start to get to know the real me behind the mask, I would have to push them away because I was so threatened by having to tell the world, tell my family that I was trans, that it was easier just to push them away, appear to become the not so nice person, and just deal with moving on. But it was a cold winter in PEI about almost 5 years ago, where it just clicked. Like, you're trans. It just clicked. It just like my egg, as they say, cracked into a million pieces. And I still have a picture of those early days where I finally got to dress up and be me. And the look in my eyes, seeing myself. It's like a kid who hadn't seen themselves in 40 years. And it was so beautiful. And it really led me to have the courage and the conviction. And I can remember a conversation I had with myself driving back from PEI after another failed relationship. I'm like, okay, I guess I'm going to start my life back again in another province. Um, I remember having the conversations with like, hey, you know what? Give yourself 2 or 3 years with this, right? I almost had the conversation with myself, the male side and the female side. And I was like, hey, yeah, you know what? We tried this. We always knew this wasn't the path. Now that we analyze it, let's give our full heart to being who we really are, who I really am. And that decision led to a very difficult journey of dozens of counselors and psychiatrists and psychologists. And the process is so long to get through to proper gender support clinics. It takes so much jumping through hoops, right? I mean, you see people like, oh yeah, there's like people are like being a cult. It's like, if this is a cult, it's one of the hardest ones to get into. And the reality is that every person I talked to along the way became a fan, became an ally, became a friend, became someone who got behind me 100%. And a lot of times I wasn't so much needing their help as I was sometimes helping them understand what it meant to be trans. And I talked to so many amazing people and finally got to the point where I could start taking HRT and finally got to the point where I was accepted for gender reassignment surgery to complete the task. And all of these steps, like I look back and say, well, if this had changed then, so many things would have disappeared along the way. So as difficult as it was to come through such a long journey, I'm very grateful for every step of the way. And I'm so pleased to finally be at this point where I get to just be me all the time.
So, Anne, I'd love to get your thoughts on this in regards to young children and transitioning. You mentioned earlier that you felt that you were trapped in the wrong body when you were younger. And if given the chance when you were younger, that you would be able to, you would take that opportunity, you would transition at an earlier age. Talk to me about that, especially in these days in 2023, and young children, trans children, and medically transitioning. Give me your thoughts on this because you've lived this. Talk to me about your thoughts on all of this.
Yeah, I will. And again, this is all my opinion. And I will offer the best of my insight on this. First of all, oh, yes, I would have loved to have been able to go back and say, hey there, young me, you're right. Those feelings you have are real. Those that desire to be the best version of yourself with the help of medical professionals who study this, who have great backgrounds, who understand the biological aspects of it. I mean, the reality is that me having taken HRT in my 40s, it's changed everything about me in such beautiful ways. My biology has changed so much. I've blossomed into who I am now. Looking back then, if I could have gone to a doctor and had a doctor say, hey, if you can go through therapy and you can discover that, hey, you know, you got the dysphoria, you have the real need to follow this path that will change you for the rest of your future, but you can always back out of it too at some level. I would have taken it, absolutely. I would love to have had a less deep voice. I would love to have had not lost all of those years trying to not discover who I was, right? I feel that I would have, like when I look at the time that I have since the beginning of my transition, the last year, the last 2 years have been absolutely phenomenal. I've hit my stride, if you will, right? To be able to focus on who I am and my tasks and what I love and who I am and where I want to go, and to be the best version of me at work and with my family and with my friends and with myself and with my music. I am able to accomplish so much more because I don't have to put everything through a filter. I don't have to be upset at a society that doesn't accept me. I mean, I'm not saying all society does accept me, but I have rebuilt my family relationships. I have become this great employee who my work bosses are always singing my praises because I go in there and I give my all, right? This is what I love doing. This is who I love being. This is everything about me. To wave back to my little self, I could see issues along the way, not for me, but for how other people would have seen me, or they feel their need to intervene as a distraction from having to fix things in their own life. So today, my concern with kids transitioning is, are they getting the right medical help? I think at a biological and psychological, even a sociological and a spiritual level, all of these things need to be talked about and discovered. And there are risks and there are real rewards as well. If a hypothetical situation, if I had my own kid and they came to me and they say, Mommy, I want to be who I really am, I'd talk with them and say, hey, what makes you feel like this? What is it that's driving you to this path? And I would take them at their word, because I know at a young age, I knew. Like the same way a kid says, no, I don't like that type of music. I don't have the ability to see or hear properly, right? People know their bodies. People have agency over their own actions and their own perceived self-identity, right? I mean, from a very young age, we know what we like and what we don't like. We know where we want to go, what we want to do. We want to be the astronaut. We want to be the doctor. The difficulty right now isn't what the kid is going to make a mistake or not. I mean, the reality is, my understanding is that if, say, a 13-year-old me wanted to transition and go on puberty blockers, me as somebody that wasn't born who I am now, would have a harder time than, say, someone who was born a girl and started developing early and wants to go on puberty blockers so that they're not growing breasts at a very young age, right? That's been very much accepted, that you want to delay your puberty, then that's fine. That same ability, that same process should be there for gender non-conforming kids as well. The surgeries, I know I had to have jaw surgery for a TMJ issue. And they knew about it when I was 15, when I was 14. They say it's going to get worse. It's going to get to a point where you could have damage to your teeth. You could have damage to your digestive system. We're going to have to do surgery on you. And I'm like, okay, that's awesome. I'm off this summer. It's like, no, but we're going to have to wait for you to stop growing first. You're going to have to wait till you're 17 or maybe even 18. We'll monitor you, but we can't do surgery until you're done growing. So I very much suspect that this process is the same. There's not major surgeries for these gender non-conforming kids wanting to pursue their authentic selves. A lot of what we hear is fear and misinformation. I don't know why they're offering so much fear and misinformation. I suspect it's to deflect and detract from their own doings and make a real bad person out of nothing in order to take the attention away from whatever thing is not so honest. You know, it's a very disingenuous process to attack trans people right now. So yeah, I would support my kid going through this transition. I would put them on puberty blockers and allow them to get to a point where, hey, you know what? We are now at 17 years old, kid. You're going to stop. You're growing soon. Are you sure? Let's go and talk with the support networks that we have in place. Let's verify that you know all of the risks and the rewards coming through this. And if you still want to make that right decision to follow your authentic life, and I'm very much proof that following your authentic life has rewards well beyond. If I lose 10 years off my life, but I get to live the next 20 with absolute joy that I'm living now, sign me up. I'm on there. This is me. Yes, absolutely. I can't think of a better life to live. I would support my kid doing the same thing too, because they deserve to find the joy and the happiness in their life, just being their authentic self. Once they had finished growing and once they've gone through the whole process, if they want to have a gender affirming surgery, whatever it is, I would support that too. I'm very accepting of people knowing their bodies the best. I'm very understanding of the difficult process of having to go through this. And I have the compassion and the understanding to know that we have wonderful medical knowledge, we have wonderful psychological help, and that it's okay to be different. So I would be on board with my child going through and becoming the best version of who they are. I would support that 100%.
I have to say, Annaa Soleseis, well said, well done, well recorded. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you very much. I'm very grateful for this, and I appreciate the time. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Keegan Hurst, former professional rugby player, coach, raving homosexual, and you're listening to Rainbow Country with Mark Tara.
And just like that, this little gay journey through Rainbow Country has come to an end. If you like what I'm doing here on this show, I hope you'll consider to like and subscribe, maybe even help me get the word out. Finally, I want to take this time to thank you for taking your time to be with me. Remember that we are living in days of making our dreams come true. So believe in yourself, and the world will believe in you.